Okay, let's dive straight into this explainer and ask what might be the ultimate survival question. What did ancient humans actually do when it rained all week? We really need to transport ourselves back to a Paleolithic world where rain wasn't just, a minor inconvenience that ruined your weekend plans. It was a relentless, genuinely lethal threat. Today we're unpacking a scenario that sounds so simple on the surface, but hides a terrifying reality for early humans. What exactly did our ancestors do when the skies opened up and just didn't stop for days on end? Put yourself in the shoes of an ancient hunter on the first night of a relentless driving storm. Seriously, imagine it. 9 straight days of just pouring rain. Well, the very first thing that happens is your tracking marks are completely washed away. Then the animals retreat and vanish into hiding. By the time you hit day 6, your stored food is running dry, your clothes are absolutely soaked, and that deep cold is starting to set right into your bones. And this brings up a terrifying biological reality. A wet human loses body heat 25 times faster than a dry one. Actually, just pause and think about that. 25 times. Without our modern waterproof jackets or cozy heated living rooms, the rain acts as a quiet, highly effective killer. It strips the natural insulation right out of animal hides, essentially turning your own clothing against you and hitting the fast forward button on hypothermia. So let's take a closer look at this lethal threat, because things escalate into an absolute nightmare the moment the temperature drops and the sun goes down. Think about the sheer terror of the prehistoric night. There's this incredible data from Swartkrans Cave in South Africa. Out of 130 early human fossil specimens found there, at least 27 show clear evidence of leopard predation. But why is that specific detail so critical during a storm? Well, because a campfire absolutely destroys your night vision. When you step away from the flames, you're totally blind. And at the same time, the deafening sound of that heavy rain perfectly masks the sound of an approaching predator. It's a terrifying, almost claustrophobic equation. Loss of night vision plus loss of hearing equals total, absolute vulnerability. Trapped inside a tiny, maybe 10-foot circle of firelight, everything beyond that glow becomes a lethal unknown. You can't hear a twig snap over the downpour, and you definitely can't see the eyes reflecting back at you from the dark, which means you're stuck in this brutal, unforgiving daily loop. You have to go out and get cold, you come back and get dry, you get warm and rest, and then you have to repeat it all over again. Breaking the cycle at literally any step, like say letting your fire die because you're suddenly flooded, meant hypothermia was mathematically guaranteed. There was zero margin for error here. To get out of this mess, early humans had to completely engineer their way to safety. They didn't just cower in holes hoping for the best. They created some incredibly advanced micro-architectural solutions. First off, they had to read the landscape perfectly. Archaeological evidence from Northwest Thailand shows that hunter-gatherers would systematically abandon those dangerous, flooded stream valleys. Lowlands meant flash floods and thick, impassable mud. Instead, they actively moved to prominent, well-drained, elevated ridges during wet seasons. They chose terrain that worked for them, not against them. Once they found those elevated rock shelters, they modified them brilliantly. They actually managed the floors by laying down layers of sand and ash to absorb rising groundwater seepage. For climate control, they draped sewn animal hides from the cave ceilings to block freezing wind, basically creating a cozy tent inside a cave. And my favorite detail, for fuel, they specifically selected fresh bone to burn alongside wood. Why? Because bonfires provide this long-lasting radiative heat that is absolutely essential for warming up a damp, freezing space. This was life-or-death infrastructure. At Kebara Cave in Israel, hearths were placed in the exact same protected spot for 300,000 years. They knew exactly where that fire had to be to survive. And we know the catastrophic cost of poor placement, too. Deadly flash flood sediments found inside Swartkrans Cave in South Africa proved that choosing the wrong shelter meant waking up in pitch blackness to a wall of rushing water. Okay, so warmth is secured, but the next massive problem hits fast: starvation. This required a total reinvention of their hunting strategies. They completely flipped the script. The old way of active chasing, slipping around in deep mud, constantly losing the trail and burning precious body heat, that was a guaranteed death sentence in a storm. So they shifted to passive waiting. Instead of fighting the environment, they let the storm do the hard work by bringing the food directly to them. This meant deploying a whole arsenal of passive hunting tactics. They pulled fish from newly flooded shallows with weirs and woven traps. They exploited the reduced vision of wild turkeys by setting up portable blinds at the edges of fields. And they even utilized massive communal drives, like the desert kites over in the Middle East, to actively funnel panicked, slipping herds into predetermined muddy choke points. But let's be real. Even the smartest fish traps aren't a guarantee. So what happens when the fresh food stops coming in? Because traditional sun drying was utterly impossible in that high humidity. They survived on what we can call the prehistoric pantry. This meant relying on foraged plants, roots, and tubers that actually thrived and swelled up during the rain. It also meant depending heavily on incredibly advanced techniques, like smoking thin meat strips over the fire, and get this, utilizing lactic acid bacteria fermentation to keep their proteins from rotting in the damp air. It all boils down to this brilliant realization. The tribes that survived the rain didn't survive because of what they did during the rain.
They survived because of what they did before it. Survival wasn't a matter of brute physical strength while the storm raged. It was entirely a test of the discipline, foresight, and long-term planning they exercised months in advance when the weather was actually clear. So you're trapped inside a damp cave for weeks on end. Let's explore how this forced isolation profoundly shaped human society. Downtime in the cave wasn't just sitting around being bored. It was a highly organized industrial period. Think of it as a prehistoric microfactory. While the storm was raging outside, the tribe was meticulously maintaining their gear. They knapped new flint scrapers, sewed complex wind-resistant garments with bone needles, and repaired their tools, making absolutely sure they were ready to go the exact moment the sky cleared. Survival was this tightly balanced equation. It required about equal parts technological prep and spatial zoning to keep the cave dry, but also heavily relied on social cohesion. And that social math was brutal, honestly. It meant rationing limited food specifically to keep the strongest hunters alive and healthy, just so they could eventually step back out and feed the rest of the tribe. But being confined together did way more than just test their limits. It forced human culture to truly flourish. Language and oral traditions blossomed as elders told stories to pass the time. Shamans painted cave walls like the awe-inspiring Wangina figures we see, creating these shared symbolic rituals to negotiate with the chaotic elements outside and forge an unbreakable group solidarity. Finally, after days or even weeks, that endless deafening drumming stops. The skies begin to break. How did they know it was time to move? They became absolute masters at reading subtle shifts in the environment. A slight change in wind direction, a tiny gap in the clouds, a shift in bird calls. By accurately anticipating that break, rested and highly coordinated tribes knew exactly when to rush out and aggressively hunt the animals that were left weak, starving, and careless by that exact same storm. And this brings us to such an incredibly profound realization. This was without a doubt the greatest unbroken survival streak in human history. Every single one of your ancestors passed this excruciating test, generation after generation. They combated the cold, the starvation, and the disease, not with modern technology, but with pure intellect, memory, and an unbreakable sense of community. So the next time the rain traps you indoors and ruins your plans, just look out the window and ask yourself, would you have the ingenuity and the discipline to survive the prehistoric storm? It's a pretty wild reminder that the readiness to weather the ultimate storm, to adapt and overcome, is quite literally encoded right there in your DNA.
Thanks so much for exploring this amazing topic with me on This Explainer.